This is the third and final stage of the client bedroom set makeover. This is the dresser. So we still have some grape leaves we got to get rid of, and some drawers to build, and a foot to fix. So we have a few things to do on this one. So follow along, and I'll show you what I had to do, and let's just see how this all turns out on this one. Well, I didn't know it when I picked the dresser up, but once I unloaded it, I realized that we had a broken foot because it fell off. You can see it has been repair attempts on this, but they didn't work. And so there's a piece of wood that is on there that I need to pull off. I need to get all the screws out. I need to snip nails. Some of them were originally nailed from underneath, and I can't push those out, so I got to snip those up. And then I need to clamp the wood piece back on that is sitting there on the dresser. And then I have to fix another place where the wood is completely gone, and I'll have to do that with Bondo. Then once I have all that done, then I am going to then glue and re-nail from the sides with several long brad nails to hold this together. So this has to be done first because I really can't move the dresser around on 3 legs very easily. So that's the first order of business, and then we're going to move on to cutting the base. So just like on the nightstands and the footboard, if you have viewed the other videos in this 3-part series, I've got to cut the base. I ought to be getting pretty good at it by this point in time, but I've marked off where I need to cut with the blue tape, and once I get it cut, then I need to sand the bottom and to make sure that it levels out. Try as I might, I do waver a little bit, so it's not a completely straight cut along that blue tape. And the grape leaves, the voids and things that are on the base doesn't help that very much. But we'll get this base cut, get the bottom sanded out so it's all square and smooth and level. And then we will fill it with, well, before I fill it with Bondo, I sand off the top of the grape leaves. I figured out after doing the first one that I don't have to sand them all completely down. I can sand it smooth so that they are level with both ends of the base because they're indented a little bit the way the base is made. So once I have all the high points sanded off, then I can fill with Bondo and let that dry. And then I usually go back after that's sanded and I fill with DAP Wood Filler. It's usually I have a few small voids and I don't really need to mix Bondo for that. But I put DAP Wood Filler on and then we sand all of that down and then we're ready to move on to the next step. So what is the next step? Next step is taking off these grapes and grape leaves off the ends of the dresser. This is the most destructive part of the entire project because once I can't get these off easily, I've got to pry them off. That's why I'm using a heat gun to try to soften the glue a little bit because they're both glued and nailed on. And then once I have them off, then I have to patch where they pulled off. I've got to remove any loose veneer because it will show up when I put the wood filler on. So get these off and let this dry, and then we'll be ready to move on. So on to building the 3 drawers. The existing drawers have drawer faces that are 1/2 inch thick. Well, you can't find, at least I couldn't find, a board that was a 1/2 inch thick. So luckily a buddy of mine down the street had a planer. First time I've used a planer, but it just made this job so easy. Um, I run it through, I flip the boards, I run it through a couple of times, and then I have a 1/2 inch board, which I can cut up and make the drawer faces. I don't get the chance of using my router very often. I have a Bosch router table and a Bosch router. Um, but I had to for this project for a couple of reasons. One, the door faces had a 1/4 inch edge around on the inside of the drawer face. And so I had to match the existing drawers. So I had to cut the 1/4 inch off on all 4 sides on 3 drawer faces. And then the way the drawers are made, they're very simple. Luckily for me, they're not dovetails or any kind of exotic um, joinery. So they're just simply glued and nailed, and the bottom slides in on a routed slot at the bottom of the drawers. So I got to use my router table to make those slots. So that's what I'm doing now, and then we'll start, I'll cut the wood and we'll start assembling drawers. So all of the sides of the drawers have been cut, and before I assemble, I do need to stain them to try to match the existing drawers. I've used a 1/2 inch birch plywood to make the drawer boxes, and I put a pre-stained conditioner on the wood, and then I went back and I applied a natural stain. I actually did a test between a golden oak and a natural. As it turns out, the natural matched the existing drawers the best. So it doesn't change the color very much, but enough to match. So I need to paint all sides of the drawer box sides, and then let that dry. And once that's dry, then I can start assembling the boxes. Since I used plywood to make the drawer boxes, the tops of the sides, show the layers of plywood, and it doesn't look good. So to fix that, I use edge banding. It is really simple to attach. I'm kind of clumsy doing it because I don't do it that often because I don't make a lot of drawers. But basically, I take a hot iron. I cut the edge banding, to size, and then to protect the bottom of the iron, I use tin foil. I kind of wrap around, and then I take the iron and I set it on top of the tin foil and kind of rub it across, and it melts the glue and causes it to stick. And so I got to do this on all tops of the drawer boxes. And then, I also need to trim off the excess on the edges. And then once I have all that done, I will eventually go back and stain the tops to match, the stain on the drawer boxes. This gives, it a real nice finished look instead of just leaving exposed plywood. So now it's time to measure and cut the bottoms for the drawer boxes. I have 2 boxes that are the same size, and the one in the middle is longer. But the procedure is the same for all of them. So I'll measure here, then I'll go to my table saw and cut the bottoms. I'm using a 1/4 inch plywood for this, again birch plywood, and the bottom's going to slide into that routed groove, and then I'll put the back on on top of it and glue it all together, and I'm going to pop some brad nails in. And for the first time, I get to use this this drawer clamp, I guess is what you call it. My son got it for me for Christmas. Never really had a chance to use it. It's kind of awkward to get it around the drawers, especially when nothing is really holding the box together. But once you get it on, then it really holds the drawers in place, the sides in place, so I can get the glue to dry. I can then pop in the brad nails, and it's a great little device. So after the drawer boxes are all assembled, then I need to cut the molding for the drawer faces and apply that. So now I need to cut and apply the molding on the drawer faces. I'm using a 1/4 inch quarter round, 45-degree cuts on all ends. And this matches the molding that is on the top drawers of the nightstands that I did. The bottom drawer and the drawers that existed on the dresser has different molding. But this coordinates with the nightstands. I think it's going to work out very nicely. So once I've got all the molding cut, then I can glue and pop in some pin nails, actually. Maybe I used brad nails. I don't remember now. At an angle. If I drove them straight through, they were too long and they would go through the bottom of the face. But if I angle them, then they don't go through, and it still helps to hold the molding in place. The next modification I need to make is to add a shelf that's going to be behind the two middle doors of this dresser. I'm using 3/4 inch birch plywood, and so I just need to measure the width and the length. And when you do this, always mark, on the wood which side is going to be the waste side. I've got to make 2 cuts out of this one piece to get this shelf. And what you don't want to do is measure and write it down. Then you get to the table saw and you realize that you've cut it in the wrong place. So always, use pencil and just kind of X off the area that's going to be the waste part of your cut. Then once I get that done, I'll come back. I will put the braces in, and I'm not going to install the shelf yet, but I am going to get the braces in and make sure that it's all going to be level. And then I will put the shelf in. I'm going to paint it separately, and then I'll put the shelf in at the very end. So the last thing I need to do to these drawers is to attach the drawer slides to each side of the drawer. Luckily, even though the doors were missing, I could see where the previous slides were, so I had a good idea of where they should go, and so I measured off of that. And so I installed the middle drawer, and I always installed one of the smaller ones, and I knew it fit. The bigger drawer is the one I was most concerned about, but it fits, works well, and I'm very pleased and relieved. So I put 2 coats of primer on this, and I sanded, as I'm showing here, between coats and after the final coat. I didn't show the spraying. It's pretty boring to watch. I do use a Wagner 3500 sprayer. This particular primer was from Sherwin-Williams, Extreme Bond Primer. I wasn't really worried about bleed through on this, so I was able to use that primer. So I'm just going to sand this down now in preparation for the base paint. And also this may expose areas that I didn't see before priming that I may have to patch. And so if I do need to patch those, then I will do that. And then I'll be ready to do the first coat of base paint. I am now spraying the base coat of paint onto the dresser. I'm going to be spraying 2 coats in total. I'm using Sherwin-Williams acrylic latex in a color called Universal Khaki. This is the color I always use when I paint a Sausalito style, and which is what the client wants and what matches the rest of the pieces. So I'm going to spray 2 coats of this, and then we're going to begin applying the glaze to give it the final finish. So whenever I apply a glaze to a dresser, I always flip it
upside down, so it's resting on its top. I've got a little bench, and I put towels down, and so it won't, harm the paint. But it's hard if it's standing upright to get the base, and it's almost impossible to get the feet because applying the glaze is a bit of a process. It's 2 or 3 steps, and but before I do that, I also have to tape off everything because when you apply the glaze, you're really making a wood faux like finish. So you want to apply the glaze in the direction that the wood grain would go, which means you got some horizontals, you got some verticals. And so what I have found, even though it takes a while to do it, I have found it's better to tape off the areas I'm not going to initially paint so that I can, because it's kind of hard to get the paint off, right? So, and if I'm changing directions, I don't want to have a dark spot of glaze which is going to affect the final coating. I do suggest that when you do tape it off and you get down with the section, immediately remove the tape. And the reason for this is that if you've had any leakage underneath the tape, you want to wipe that off immediately so it doesn't dry, which will affect the applying of the glaze on the next section. So you want to get any of that paint that leaked through off of there, and then you just keep going section by section. I'm not going to show everything that I painted with the glaze, but I am going to show painting one of these door panels that I removed from the 2 doors in front. And the reason I'm going to show this is that I have I learned a new technique to apply at the end, which I did want to show. So I just show the tools that we're going to use: paint brush to spread out the glaze, deck brush, a broom that you can get at the dollar store. And so basically we want to just get the glaze on as best you can. Doesn't have to look real pretty. And then we're going to take our deck brush and start removing glaze. And you want to wipe off the brush. I do after every pass because I don't want to just keep spreading glaze around. I want to remove it. And so we go back and forth until you finally get a look that you're satisfied with. And then once you're done with that, you take the little brush, the broom, and you go back and forth, which creates a little bit more of a texture. It does remove a little bit of glaze, but not a whole lot. But gives more texture and moving the glaze around more than anything else. And then the final step that I have just started doing, and I really like the results, it's called flogging. I picked this up in watching a few other videos, and you simply just take your brush, in this case I'm using the deck brush, and lightly on the flat side just pad the glaze down, I guess is a way to put it. I go the width of the brush down the whole panel, then I scoot over and I do it again until it's done. I do the same technique on the dresser, and I think it ends up adding a little bit more of a kind of a realistic wood finish to it, and I think it looks really, really nice. So that's the final step that I do. It's called the flogging. I also wanted to address another issue when using this kind of a finish. When you put the glaze on, it tends to kind of pile up in the corners. This is especially true on drawers, but it can also be in the corners of your dresser. It's hard to get that out with the deck brush. And I don't believe you want to leave it there because it will tend to leave kind of a dark, you know, I think unfinished look to the edges of your piece, because you've got, you know, glaze that sit there. It's a different color than everything else. It's darker. And so I use a small little brush to try to pull it out away from the corners to get the excess out of there. And then when I do that, I'll go back with the deck brush and smooth it all out. I believe this gives it a little bit more of a professional look, and it removes that excess glaze that's really hard to do with your deck brush. You can do it a little bit. You see I'm kind of edging the deck brush there on the edges. That's also pulling out the glaze off the edge. It's a little easier when I'm going in the same direction as my deck brush is. When I first showed pulling it out with the smaller brush, you know, I don't want to take my deck brush down that edge because it's going against the grain that I'm trying to create. So that's why I use a smaller brush. So keep that in mind when you're doing a Sausalito style. Before showing the final makeover and transformation, I wanted to revisit where we started from. This is what we started from right here. Missing drawers, grape leaves that has to be removed, and this is the final transformation. This was quite a project, but I'm real proud of how it turned out. We had to make 3 drawers. We had to remove grape leaves from the side and cut the base and remove the grape leaves and from the base and apply the Sausalito finish, new handles, and this is the final product. I'm very proud of this, very pleased. The customer is very pleased, and this just turned out beautiful. So this was the final phase of the client bedroom set makeover. We started out doing 2 nightstands, then a headboard and a footboard, and finally the dresser. So I hope that you enjoyed this video, that you found it educational, somewhat entertaining, and if you did, and if you have not subscribed, I would ask that you please do, and join me on the next furniture flip, makeover, or transformation from the next season. Thank you so much for watching.